Stormybman reacts video, and this is my reaction video to the recent James Gunn slate announced for the new DCU. There's been a lot of controversial comments, thoughts, messaging going back and forth about what has transpired with DC Studios and their new cinematic universe plans going forward. Earlier this week, he made an announcement, as he said he would by the end of January, of what their plans were going forward. And a number of people who enjoy the cinematic standpoint for the studios of Warner Brothers that produced the DC films, they've been unhappy. They've been unhappy for an assortment of reasons. And I think it's been primarily because the studio has had their IP going in so many different directions that no one can really get a grasp of what was to be and what to expect. While in the meantime, on the other side, we had seen things done a little bit differently with Marvel Studios and how they decided to plan and map out what they were doing on their side of things and how they would produce their fare. And Kevin Feige was at the head of that, and it took a few efforts for them to finally hit the ground and be running and to produce the type of content and fare that audiences didn't mind returning to the theaters to shovel their coin out to support, especially when it came down to seeing some of their favorite characters finally get a chance to shine on the silver screen. So there was a blueprint, but you have to understand that even though Mr. Feige, when he came in with his ideas, they were initially resented as well on the side of him thinking about making everything a connected, united universe of an assortment of characters that they had throughout an anthology of comic book history. So Gunn has now been given the task of trying to point the DCU in the direction similar. And he and his partner, Peter Safran, have made a plan. And they got back with their boss, who told them that the main characters, the Trinity, Superman, Wonder Woman, Batman, should be definitely at the base of what they're doing. Superman should be the character that they would like to show going forward, and build everything around that. We've seen good storytelling, we've seen so-so storytelling, and we've seen horrendous storytelling through this entire process prior to Gunn and Safran being given the keys to the kingdom. And one of the things that hurt DC in the past is that the studio executives didn't really get behind the leadership at the time that was trying to create the type of fare that audience can return to again and again. It was always like something would get put out. They would base what their next plan was on the audience reaction. But they had fed the audience the idea of, we're going to do this and we're going to do that. But once the item came out and it didn't bring in the type of box office that they thought it should, or if it just didn't catch on with the fans, they just abandoned ship and started something else. And the one thing that they would always revert to is make another Batman film. And it's like Batman, Batman, Batman. And that was horrible because there were opportunities at other characters, like the Green Lantern with Ryan Reynolds. Even though the first film wasn't as successful as they may have liked it to be, I kind of hearken that back to like the Captain America film, or even the Incredible Hulk, or even Thor with Marvel, that it didn't quite deliver like they wanted to initially, but there was a post-credit and a promise of what was to come. And in the Green Lantern sense, we saw that the character Sinestro had forged a yellow ring, which means that he was going to be Hal Jordan's enemy. Hal would have to come back at some point in the future and face off against his original mentor in Sinestro, who had now left the Lanterns and become a yellow Lantern. So that was something to look forward to, and they just abandoned it, just like that. And they had great actors. All they needed was to hunker down in better writing and deliver the goods. Go all out for the sequel. And this is something that they didn't understand at the time. They just thought that because Marvel was making comic book films and it should bring in a certain amount of box office and we should have some success and we should be able to ride that. But see, Feige's plan was, win or lose, we got to steady the ship. We still want to get to the destination. It might take a little bit longer. We might even have to adjust our route, but we're going to this destination. And I remember he speaking at the comic book convention, and when they were talking about bringing out the characters in films that they had the rights to, but their major characters were sold away. Spider-Man, the X-Men, the Hulk and Namor were with other studios, the full rights. They had part rights to the Hulk and Namor, but Spider-Man and X-Men were at Sony and Fox. Even Blade was at New Line Cinema, and Blade kicked everything off, meaning that audiences were ready to see superheroes on the screen again. Warner Brothers always had the Christopher Reeve Superman films in the bank. The when they had the Batman films with Michael Keaton, and then later, there were other iterations of Batman. It was always there. Then more than recently, it was the Christopher Nolan. So Batman was kind of always there. Well, Bryan Singer tried to bring back Superman with Brandon Routh's performance trying to channel Christopher Reeve. It wasn't as successful as they had hoped. And Brandon Routh's channeling of Christopher Reeve wasn't bad. It's just that audiences had moved on from that. Now we're hearing that Gunn and company may want to revert back to what was so familiar. The old Boy Scout, Superman that Christopher Reeve played. This even after Zack Snyder had given us a darker Superman because that's what the studios wanted at the time. People blamed Zack for that, but it was like that wasn't his whole doing. Remember, they wanted him to do this. They even brought Christopher Nolan in as an executive producer of the first Man of Steel film. And I say first, but the only Man of Steel film. They didn't even call it Superman at that time. So even though that Man of Steel is one of the monikers that Superman is referred to, it was a change in the culture, a change in the direction. And Nolan didn't want that Superman to be a part of what he did with his Batman, but you still wanted it to be a darker, brooding Superman. And you didn't want them to link up. But they should have, because this is what you created. And Christian Bale, who had 3 Batman films under his belt, and the last Batman was ending just as this Man of Steel film was beginning. What more than a great way to tie it together, especially since the film that followed was Batman versus Superman. An older, grizzled Batman returning to take on Superman. Christian Bale could have been grandfathered in, and that would have been your Robert Downey Jr. anchor. You understand? But they elected to, again, start all over again. And it wasn't Zack Snyder's fault. He built an audience and almost of like cult-like following, but the studios were angry and upset because they just weren't knocking things out of the park. Well, it's interesting because if the studio executives would stop meddling into, you've given these guys the green light to go and do something, and then you come in and say, oh, we don't want this in there. Oh, take that out. Oh, cut this down and this and that. And it's like, we want to be able to show the film more times a day in a theater. So make sure it comes in under these minutes so that we can get so many showings in a day. You see, you're thinking about that instead of thinking about putting out quality content. Because if you're putting out quality content, people will go back 3-4 times and watch it. They'll buy tickets for the whole day and stay in the theater in the same reserved seats for the whole day, if they're capable of doing so, because you've put out a great product. So you guys are not looking at this the correct way. And you think about films like Lord of the Rings. Now, everybody knows that Peter Jackson will make a film as long as your arm. You know what I'm saying? But he puts out good stuff. Sometimes it might be a little too much, but he gives you something. And Snyder appeared to do the same thing with his Justice League and Batman versus Superman films. And they cut those films to shreds so much that they were a mess all over the place. People couldn't understand what was going on because most of the body and the detail and interpersonal reactions and things with the characters, it had been stripped away on the cutting room floor. That was not his fault. So Gunn, who's had some success with Marvel Studios, is now bringing some of his capability in filmmaking to DCU, leading to, again, his announcement of the slate of what their intents are going forward. So we'll get a chance to listen to a little bit of what he had to share about the direction that they're heading, and I'll comment on it a little bit.
Hey everybody, I'm James Gunn. I'm the co-CEO of DC Studios. So as many of you know, DC has been disconnected in film and television for a long time. And it's one of, our jobs, mine and Peter's, is to come in and make sure the DCU is connected in film, television, gaming, and animation. That the characters are consistent, played by the same actors, and it works within one story. And if something is outside of that, like Matt Reeves' Batman or Todd Phillips' Joker or Teen Titans Go, that it is clearly labeled as DC Elseworlds, outside of the mainstream DCU continuity. Now, Peter and I have gotten pretty lucky in terms of the 4 projects that are coming out over the next year. First, we have Shazam! Fury of the Gods. Shazam has always been off kind of in his own part of the DCU, so he connects very well. That moves directly into The Flash, a fantastic movie that I really love that resets the entire DC universe. Then to move into Blue Beetle, a fantastic film about a kid who's a marvelous part of the DCU, and then into Aquaman 2, which leads directly into our next few projects, which I'm going to tell you about now. So, Peter and I, along with a group of very talented writers, have started to map out an 8 to 10 year plan of what DC Studios will be in film, television, and gaming. This first chapter is called Gods and Monsters. Now this, what I'm about to tell you, is a part of the first chapter. It's not the entire first chapter. The first project is Creature Commandos. Creature Commandos is an animated series. I've written all the episodes. Something we're going to do that's a little bit different at DC is we're going to have characters move into animation, out of animation, usually having the same actor play their voice as who plays them in live action. The next project up is Waller. This is a story of Amanda Waller, played by Viola Davis. Viola Davis is going to team up with members of Team Peacemaker, and this is a story that's been created by Crystal Henry, who did Watchmen, and Jeremy Carver, who created the Doom Patrol. It is a fantastic story that's out of this world, and I can't wait for people to see it. Okay, next up is the big one, the true beginning of the DCU. This is called Superman Legacy. This is being written by me. I'm in the middle of it. I'm having a great time doing it. And Superman will be released into theaters July 11th, 2025. Okay, the next thing is a big premiere HBO. And we have a few other lanterns peppered in there, but this is really a terrestrial-based TV show, which is almost like True Detective with a couple of Green Lanterns who are space cops. Authority is a passion project of mine. It's based on the marvelous Wildstorm characters we are now bringing into the DCU and will interact with all of our primary DCU characters. The Authority are a group of superheroes who think the world is broken and they want to fix it by any means necessary. I think it's a very different look at superheroes. We're doing a television series called Paradise Lost. Paradise Lost is the story of Paradise Island, usually known as Themyscira, which is the birthplace of Wonder Woman. It's almost like Game of Thrones with Westeros, but with all of the inhabitants of Paradise Island. The introduction of the DCU's Batman is The Brave and the Bold. The Brave and the Bold is the story of Batman and his actual son, Damian Wayne. This is based on Grant Morrison's great comic book run. Damian Wayne is my favorite Robin. He's a little assassin who Batman tries to get in line, and so this is the story of the two of them and the beginning of sort of the Bat family in the DCU. Next up is a TV series called Booster Gold. Booster Gold is one of comics' really popular cult heroes. He is a fascinating guy. He's a loser from the future who uses future technology to come back to present day and become a superhero so that people will love him. It is basically the superhero story of imposter syndrome on an HBO Max series. One of my favorite comic book series from last year was Tom King's run on Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow. And so we're going to turn that into a big science fiction epic film. Now, Superman is a guy who was sent to Earth and raised by loving parents, whereas Supergirl in this story, she is a character who was raised on a chunk of Krypton. She watched everybody around her perish in some terrible way, so she's a much more jaded character. And that brings me to Swamp Thing, the last thing we're going to talk about, a very dark horror story in the origins of the monster who is Swamp Thing. And although it's totally outside of the rest of the DCU, it will still feed into the rest of the stories. Anyway, those are the stories that I can tell you about right now. I've loved the DC characters since I was a child. They're incredibly important to me. I knew that this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to do something very different. One of the things that's very important for me in all of these movies and TV series is that the director's vision and the vision of the writers and all of the creators is unique and something special. Storytelling is always king. That's all that matters to us. And I want to be true to those stories. I want to be true to you guys and really give you something different than you've ever seen before. Anyway, thank you, everybody. I appreciate you watching. I hope this was exciting for you because it's really exciting for me. And I can't wait to start to dive into these stories with you guys on this grand adventure. Thank you so much. Hey, everybody. I'm James Gunn. I'm the co-CEO.
So again, those were the words of Mr. Gunn releasing his plans, he and Peter Safran's plans going forward for, what they're calling the first portion or the first chapter, Gods and Monsters. And they're trying to let audiences know that this is the beginning of where they're going. Now, there are productions that are slated for release before the initiation of what he and his partner plan to present as the new DCU. So there's going to be some time that will lapse by the time the first Superman film comes out under their watch. And they're expecting some type of, they know that things are going in a different way. So they're expecting some type of reaction from the audiences, whether it's positive or negative. And it's going to be like a built-in understanding that will take place. My thing is, I want them to acknowledge the characters that the people want and cohesive storytelling, whether it's across all their media of comic books, video games, and all of that, as they're trying to promise. Sometimes you can deliver on that stuff and sometimes you can't. But the whole point of it is to get the audience to buy into storytelling that they can return to the theaters for. And that's the most important thing. Now, the shakeup, I've released my thoughts on, what I thought about them not bringing Henry Cavill back as Superman after having him announce that he was back after appearing in the Black Adam film. And I know that some of that was done prior to Gunn and Safran taking over or being announced as the men who would be taking over. But I still felt that it was not the cleanest way to handle that situation of what they were dealing with. There could have been a better way to do that, and they opted to go the way that they did, and they're receiving backlash as a result of that, rightfully so. They have all the, power in the world to change and recast people and all of that if they want to. But understand this, there has been a history of hitting the reboot, hitting the switch of starting over with DC. And people are tired of that. Some of these people that we speak of they've gone on and gone from young folks to college and high school and then college people over the course of this time, and haven't had a cohesive story and history of the characters that they love and want to see and support through this process consistently. I remember after having watched Endgame, Marvel's Endgame, Avengers Endgame, saying that, wow, it's been 22 films and I made it through all of these films, and that last story, even though there were elements that, key points that didn't get followed up on and things of that nature, but I enjoyed. And I remember when this character went from this place to that place over those 22 films, the arcs, I was impressed. And I was satisfied with what they finished up with because they stuck to their guns. There was something to be said about these characters. I remember Tony Stark being a selfish, didn't get along and play well with others type guy, and Captain America, who stood up for everybody and injustice everywhere. Their personality characteristic traits kind of flip-flopped. At the end, Cap became a non-trusting guy who was kind of like a little more self-centered, and Tony gave the ultimate sacrifice. But you can do that over 22 films. You can take these characters through transition where they become from this guy and become that guy, and from that woman being here and becoming like that. It's what you do when you do storytelling. You can't keep hitting the reboot and the play over and the do-over switch over and over again. You'll lose people along the way. Green Lantern should have been a part of Zack Snyder's Justice League. He should have. He's a major character. They put Cyborg in there, who's really with Teen Titans. But again, you see what was missing? And this is not just being critical. It's an acknowledgement. This is like an editorial on the fact that you have this slate. You think you have someplace that you want to go. Well, take us by the hand, and you need to acknowledge that in your people that support your brand. We're not going to like everything you do. You're not going to like everything you have to do, but you got to do it. You got to give them what they want. And that doesn't mean oversaturate, but at some points you have to deliver. Another point about Endgame. That final film delivered in so many ways. People got to see Steve Rogers lift Mjolnir, say Avengers Assemble. Spider-Man met Captain Marvel on film like he did in the comics. They actually had a relationship in the comics. I mean, so many goodies. Pepper wearing her rescue armor. They gave the fans so much. But they kept the fans around long enough to deliver those tidbits, and people were appreciative. I didn't like they didn't let the Hulk get his get back against Thanos. I'll forever hold that over their head because they really blew it. The Russos, for as great as they were in doing what they were doing with storytelling of multiple characters, you dropped the ball on the Hulk, man. You dropped the ball. And I am as unforgiving as a crocodile that latches on to some flesh, because I'm going to tell you something. The Hulk is an important character in the comics and in the Marvel Universe. He's almost immortal. And you guys really punked him. You punked him. But this isn't about Marvel. Just giving some explanation about how I noticed the difference in how mistakes can be made and how you can come back and right the ship. So we're looking at what DC is trying to do going forward. And Mr. Gunn, it's your responsibility now to carry that and carry it well. But the other thing that you started off doing wrong is alienating people with what's perceived as arrogance and everything. Just know silence is golden. You don't have to respond to everything. And you happen to be one of these people out here in current time that enjoys to exercise your right to use social media. There's always going to be trolls out here. You know what I'm saying? And I don't troll. I'll speak my opinions and they may not be popular, but I don't troll people. And I've had harsh words to say about you, Mr. Gunn, since you joined over at Warner Brothers to become this head of producing content for that company. My harshness is just harsh criticism because I recognize that when you come across like you think you're smarter than everyone else, it can open up avenues for people to really attack in nasty ways. But if you let people know your position and why, they don't have to accept that. But once you've done that, you close that door and you keep on moving. Now, we have no choice but to either wait and see what you're doing, what you're producing, and give a thumbs up, thumbs down, or a sideways to that, or we could just walk away, just blindly not accepting what you may have to offer. I like comic book films, so I will be around. But I also understand that there's a difference between Marvel and there's a difference in DC in tone and how their stories are told and written in the comics and have been for generations. Don't turn DC's commodities, IPs, into Marvel. Don't do that. And don't turn them into James Gunn's way. Remember the source material and understand that people want the source material. And if you can do that, you'll go a long way toward producing great content. And people will get behind that and support it. They're never going to like you 100%. They're just not. That's just in people. Just like they don't like me 100%. You know what I mean? But when people can see that you have purpose and you're doing things with passion and a particular type of devotion, there's respect that comes with that. And those are my thoughts. I hope that everyone enjoyed my little Stormybman reacts to James Gunn's Slate announcement, Chapter 1, Gods and Monsters. And we'll look forward to seeing what they do. The new Superman, I only hope that it's fitting and that it can be a part of something greater. I didn't talk about the Batman thing because he's already jumped Batman up into a different point of his storytelling, introducing the sun and all of that. You're going to skip over a lot of storytelling to get to that. Okay. But we've had 1,000 Batman films to begin with, right? So there you go. So I look forward to see what happens. This is Stormybman, and it's been Stormybman Reacts. Peace. Shout out to the mighty LDBC and Liberated Perspective, a third eye view of the world. For more content such as this, please like, comment, subscribe, and share. That's all I have for you at this time. Everyone be safe, and we'll catch you on the next one.